So I am a part of United Left as well as Paco, and we are here to sort of bring all of the disparate branches of the left together in several ways. And so in the media way, we are starting with these monthly panels, which will be on a variety of topics. And our first topic is the federal job guarantee. I am hosting it, as well as Kiko Gomez. And we will be speaking to organizers on the ground. We have Eric Kessner from the Yellow Vests, and we have Andre Walton from Our Revolution. We have Jason Call, who's a congressional candidate as well as an activist in Washington. And we have Steve Grumbine, who's a podcast and activist with Real Progressives. They are co-hosting the show with United Left. We have Fadl Kaboub, who is our resident academic economist. He's also the founder of GISP, the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity, and Liz Medina from the AFL-CIO. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We've got a range of people, candidates, academics, organizers, and what we want to do essentially is just help the public get up to speed a little bit on what a job guarantee is. And it's not rocket science, so it's not too difficult to understand. And we want to figure out what the best way to get it done. I mean, because it's something that can at the same time, boost our economy. It can eliminate unemployment, and it can raise the minimum wage. So I think anything that can do all three of those things in one thing is probably worth doing. It has a range of other benefits, including the services that will be enacted from the job guarantee itself. So the job guarantee is not necessarily just what you would think of when you think of like the WPA or the New Deal from, the 1930s, because when we think of that, we think of, like monuments and parks and airports and stuff like that. And that's completely part of the job guarantee. But also we'll be covering things like childcare, elder care, Green New Deal concerns, anything that the local governments deem worth doing for their communities.
So is this
yeah,
this is overall going to be a federal program, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to guarantee every working able person a guaranteed job.
Yes.
Are there certain restrictions? Are there certain tests they'll have to pass? Is there an ability exam? And also, I asked Paco this question yesterday, and you might have the exact same answer, but is everyone going to be funneled into federal jobs or city jobs or state jobs, or is this also going to funnel people into the private sector? And given if it does go into the private sector, are companies going to get a tax break for signing up to be part of this program? How are you going to incentivize that? If it is going to be infrastructure, like you mentioned, parks and stuff like that, I know that we're in a big need here in this country for an infrastructure update. The majority of our infrastructure is from the 70s and hasn't been updated since. So I'm completely 110% on board with agreeing that we absolutely need to upgrade the infrastructure of this this country. So I'm assuming that's also where some of the focus will be.
Can we take this question by question?
Yeah, absolutely.
You asked me, it's a very important question, and it's one that I was personally concerned about as well. Do we have to take any tests before we are guaranteed a job? No, not that I am. Okay, so this is an idea that has been enacted in certain instances. And Ayanna Pressley has proposed a resolution, and the resolution has yet to be further developed, but it does specifically say that it guarantees jobs to people with a criminal history. And I was just talking to Steve Grumbine from Real Progressives this morning about whether or not a drug test would be involved. Mm-hmm. That affects me personally. And he said he didn't know for sure, but that he hopes not. And I think that it would be something that I would be fighting for, to have no drug test, no logic testing, no BS personality testing, because they do.
Can I piggyback off that a little bit?
Yeah.
I don't want to move on. I'll stay with what we're talking about, like qualifying people. So no drug tests, no background checks. So that'll free up jobs for felons, things like that. When normally they would run into roadblocks. So, I mean, everybody has different skill sets, right? Everybody is going to be good at different things, either based on education or previous job history. So let's say somebody doesn't have any job history. Let's say that this is their first job, no criminal background, no anything like that. Is there going to be, when I was in the military, we took the ASVAB, right? which is just a questionnaire on almost every topic you can think of. And it's not really a pass or fail. Well, you can fail it, but it's almost impossible to fail it. And basically what they do is they look at those answers and they go, okay, based on your, how you answered, you're better in this area, and then they would recommend, specific jobs for you based on that. You mentioned no aptitude test. You didn't want an aptitude test associated with that. Would you consider that an aptitude test? Whereas I would say that would kind of help us put people in different areas where they would, they would be better at.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't consider that an aptitude test because what from my experience, and I've applied to a lot of jobs in my life, a lot of different jobs. What I mean by an aptitude test is essentially what you'd see on the SATs, a list of logic questions and stuff like that. And when employers issue those things, and usually they issue them for the worst jobs, the crappiest jobs, the least paying jobs, they're filtering you. They are looking for an excuse not to hire you, essentially. So that's what I really mean by that level of qualification. Because when we talk about training, and you spoke about the military, a lot of people use the military model to explain a federal job guarantee, because the training would be on the job, the training would be paid. We don't care about your experience. We don't care about your IQ level. It's more about you're guaranteed a job, and the money comes federally. It's going to be distributed to local governments, and local governments will determine what kind of jobs are needed in the community.
To the state level, or even down to the city level?
I would think that it would be a state level, and then the state would determine cities regionally. I think so. The idea is to fund nonprofit efforts that are already going on. So it's not necessarily to compete. I know you have mentioned the private market. So we can back up to that quickly for a minute. The federal job guarantee, it guarantees jobs federally speaking. You will be employed by the government. You would not be employed by the private sector. These are not a round of tax cuts. If you look at Joe Biden's job plan, he is proposing a round of tax cuts on many levels and presenting it as if it were a job guarantee like the New Deal of the 1930s. It, however, is not. It is a round of tax cuts to encourage private employment. The federal job guarantee is specifically not that. The federal job guarantee philosophy, I suppose, if you want to say, is that when there is not enough employment in the market, the government will buy up the extra employment to raise the price of labor, as if it were, they call it a buffer stock. So essentially, the government itself is buying your jobs until the private sector can bounce back enough to come up with enough competitive jobs to take you back from the government, essentially.
I gotcha. So whereas in the private sector, of course, they're, depending on what the job is, they're looking for somebody with particular requirements, right?
Right.
So
right.
if you're saying, you don't need any experience, you wouldn't need anything like that, you could just enter the job and they would put you somewhere. And then presumably you would gain skills in that job that could then be translated over into the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the thing as well? Is that kind of also the plan, is giving people a place where they can build skills to then go work in the private sector?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would also say with that, people then start generating more income, which then they go and spend it more, and then it creates better jobs in the private sector as well, because then more people are spending money, rather like Joe Biden's plan that you mentioned, where he's just giving them tax cuts. People are really not spending more money because they're getting the same low paying jobs. And with the federal jobs guarantee, they get good paying jobs that gives them that additional disposable income.
And how much? And how much is going? Is there going to be a starting pay? Are you going to get paid more if you already have a skill? How is that going to be measured?
There will be, I believe, a rock bottom price, and then from there. So the idea is that they would fund nonprofit things that are already sort of in place. So locally speaking, and not solely. I mean, if there's not, like, for example, if there's like not a child care group that is catering to a certain neighborhood, they might create one to do that. But the idea is more so that we provide a rock bottom price, and then it's not necessarily dictative of other job prices. I'm personally a socialist. I believe in general that, like, in a utopian world, there would be a standard wage and that everyone would get the same wage. But that is not at all a part of the federal job guarantee whatsoever. The federal job guarantee promises a rock bottom wage. Figure has not been mentioned. I personally believe in a $25 minimum wage. That's what I would be fighting for. I think that $15 is too little, and from 10 years ago. So that's what I would propose. Other people have different ideas, but I think that generally speaking, among MMT economists and the left, we're all interested in seeing a $25 minimum wage.
So that would be bare entry. Somebody coming in with no experience, no anything, would be guaranteed $25 an hour plus benefits. Would that be included as well? So that kind of brings me up to the next question. One, who would oversee this? Would this just become part of the current Department of Labor? They would oversee this? Would you want a whole new branch to oversee this? How would that work? And number two, what does it look like from start? Let's say the first 10 years, how much would this cost?
Those are questions that I don't have specific answers to, unfortunately. I do know that you sort of had two questions. How much would it cost? I definitely cannot answer that.
Yeah, and also, what part of the government would oversee it? Would it fall currently under the Department of Labor, or would there be a whole different section that would oversee it?
I would hope that they would create a completely new oversight board to oversee this. And oversight is a huge issue, especially when you're talking about this much money being dispersed. So
enough to warrant a secretary on the cabinet?
Possibly. That's not something that I'm wonky enough to know about, but it's an excellent question, and I would be happy to bring it up at the panel, or have you guys bring it up in the Q&A session if you're interested.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good tease into what we'll hear in the panel. I know a lot of the questions will be answered there. So yesterday we talked, because I found this study, and we'll put it on the description, but it is estimated to cost around $670 billion in the first year.
Okay.
So it's less than we spend in the military, of course. But then after the first year, then it just starts going down once people start shifting to the private sector, and there's more disposable income, more sales tax being generated. A lot of the other federal programs that support low-income people won't be needed, so then they get to fund some of this, which leads me to the next question for you, Jonathan, right? You being more towards the right, libertarian. How do you align with a federal jobs program? Oh
yeah, I mean, no, please don't, no disrespect. I mean, I don't believe the government should have anything to do with jobs at all. I think the government is responsible for three things: defending our country, which they're okay at; responsibly handling foreign policy, which, and stopping a plague, which we really kind of messed up. Those are those are the only three things I've asked them to do, and they bundled all three of them. I don't believe the government should be responsible in providing jobs. I don't think the government should also be responsible for maintaining a wage. Now, that's just my viewpoint on it, because, and granted, I'm someone who spent time in the military, so I chose to go join the military. So it's not, which is a broken piece of junk anyway. Anything the government runs has been run into the ground. And I believe that what you guys are pushing for, which is a good job for everybody, a livable wage, a $25 an hour, being able to enter the workforce without, if you can't afford college, right, which happens to a lot of people, you can't afford college and you can't afford a trade school and you have no choice but to work straight out of high school. I get it, because coming out of high school and trying to find a job that experience is just not going to happen. Especially one that you can afford your own place, your car, especially if you have kids, food. So I definitely understand where you guys are coming from a need perspective. I just absolutely do not think the federal government should be the one running this. And that's why I brought up the private sector, if there could be some incentive to drive private companies to partner with what you're at, partner with this program and say, yes, we're willing to pay our employees $25 minimum, $25. And the government can write out its restrictions to say this is what you guys need to conform to in order to be part of the program. You guys need to pay your employees this much. You guys need to offer this level of benefit, all this other stuff. And in return, whatever, if you don't want to do a tax credit, there's a million other things they could tangle federal contracts in front of them, infrastructure contracts, whatever the case may be. We've got to replace bridges in this county. If you're willing to take this many workers from our program, pay them this amount, train them, offer them benefits, then we'll give you an incentive to get this to do the contract and fix the bridges. And that's just a small example, right? I mean, the bridges are not the only thing that need to be fixed in this country. We've got huge road problems. We got power grid problems. I mean, we in Texas saw what happened. We had a slight snowstorm. I mean, it shut down the majority of our state, and that just comes from aging infrastructure, sagging lines everywhere. So there's lots of jobs to be done here in the country. And from my perspective, we can both get on board with agreeing that there needs to be better opportunity for people coming out of high school to get a livable wage. My argument is the government doesn't run it. Now, if the government wants to partner with the private sector and partner with certain companies and offer them some sort of incentive, if you don't want it to be taxes, it could be contracts, whatever, and then give them stipulations and say, this is what you have to meet. You can't drug test, whatever else you want to put on there, right? You can't check for felonies. We'll give you the people. You have to take them. And then they'll still get the same thing. They'll get the $25 an hour. They'll get the benefits, and they'll get the on-the-job training. And then, of course, they could take those skills and go elsewhere if they want to, or if they turn out to be such great employees, the employee can then choose to direct hire them, whatever the case may be. That's just my thought on the whole aspect of it. I just don't trust the government to handle.
I wouldn't trust Biden with anything.
That rollout.
So.
And it's not just Biden either. I wouldn't trust Trump either. I mean,
it's a great conversation. I'm really glad you brought it up, because that's sort of a Biden's approach already, is to offer tax cuts to spur employment. If you look at the job plan that he's proposed, that's exactly what he's about to do. But he's about to do it with extremely little oversight and absolutely no regulation whatsoever. So if you were to take that plan, add oversight, add regulation, then yeah, I think it could work. Maybe as well as a job guarantee. I don't know. I think the word guarantee is very important to the job market. And I don't have a full understanding of exactly how that is, but it's a balance thing. So that if if there's any room left in the bill saying that you don't have to employ people, like there will still be a section that will be unemployed, that want work and won't be able to attain, you know what I'm saying? So, or they'll be underemployed and they'll be paid littler.
Well, again, you could build that list of stipulations, right? You can say, here's what you gain from joining this program, right? Here's what we offer you. We can add the tax cut on there. We can add whatever. And in exchange, you have to meet these requirements. You have to pay the employee this amount of money. You have to offer them benefits. You can't do a background check. Whatever else you think is necessary to throw in there. And of course, I think that'll differ from state to state too. But just doing a blanket tax cut, I mean, does not. It makes an impact, but not nearly the impact you're looking for.
And that reminds
not nearly the impact you're looking for.
Of something.
Impact, because we looked at the tax cuts from 2008, and that's exactly what Obama did, right? So, and it did not. It statistically did not boost the economy at all in the way that we expected. Did not create jobs whatsoever. I mean, when
Jonathan
you give
became
tax
richer.
cuts, what's that?
Jonathan became richer.
When?
I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome.
When?
I didn't, but that's great. When you offer tax cuts to private businesses, to the banks, you are enabling them to pocket that money and not put it.
That's absolutely what they do with 90% of those funds.
And it's what they did during the last stimulus, and it's what they'll do again during this next job plan.
Yep.
So that I agree with you 100%. If this is going to be rolled out, and you're going to partner with the private sector,
I would think
it can't just be a tax cut. It can't just be a tax cut because that's going to do nothing. It's going to go nowhere. However, I do think that infrastructure is such an important thing right now, and there's a lot of labor that's going to need to be done. I think on top of infrastructure, we need to completely relook how we're delivering power to this country. There's a huge list of upgrades that America needs, and it's going to take a lot of people to do it. It's going to take a lot of people to do it, and it can take people who necessarily don't have college educations. I mean, it's going to take people to put stuff together. It's going to take people to pave roads and put down asphalt, and what draws people away from those jobs a lot of times is it's outside and it doesn't pay well. If you're getting $25 an hour and you're also getting benefits on top of it, you're going to find a lot more people willing to do those jobs, especially if they know, and there can also be protections in there too. You can't terminate, down here in Texas, it's an at-will state.
Mhm.
So you can be terminated at any point, at any time, for
Yeah, I
whatever
think-
reason. So you could also you could also stipulate vacation time. You could also stipulate, this is gonna require, whether it's federally whether it's just strictly federal jobs, or it does decide to go private sector, it's gonna require a huge bill. And then you
Mhm.
talk about the oversight piece of it, right?
Yeah.
What scares me is if you put it as part of the Department of Labor, you have the Secretary of Labor,
Mhm.
and then you put a subcommittee in charge of it, right? Or however you want to run it. And you could have, in that subcommittee, you could have a representative from every state, right? And then that representative, says, okay, based on our state's needs, this is the priority of the projects that we need done. This is the head count that we're going to need, and these are the companies that are willing to partner with us on getting it done. The problem with that, with overseeing an entire 50 states, we already know the mess lobbying makes in Washington, right? Imagine, it automatically puts the rich companies at the top, right? Because they're going to be able to go in there to their state representative, do whatever schmoozing they want to do, and say, "Look, hook us up with the Jobs Act," and that and I agree with Paco on this. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but one thing I do believe in is that lobbying has no place in Washington. Special interest money has no place in Washington, and that scares me. Whether it's federally, all federal jobs, or whether the private sector gets involved, special interest money just gets thrown around so quickly,
Yeah.
and it could muddy a program like this so fast.
Yeah, and this is where I was going to tell you about with the private sector, right? Every company does it. There's one that we're very familiar with, Jonathan. They get to the point where they want those tax cuts so bad that they start also manipulating their numbers, because I've been in those meetings where they would say, if you have even one Black employee, you need to tell us, because it's going to be part of our tax cuts. So then they just start thinking of all the ways that they can play with the reporting to qualify for those tax cuts, and then they forget about the goal of the program, which is help people have a job. So it gets messy there with the private sector too that way, and it's a big program. I really look forward to the panel. When is the panel, Bess?
The panel is June 5th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. That's when it is. And I believe that we will be putting out the RSVP link starting Monday. So I also want to add in that the idea of a federal job guarantee, and I've heard this from several people, is not to take jobs away from the private sector, is not to compete with the private sector. So if there are small contractors that are used to doing business with the government and they want to go build a bridge somewhere, that the funding would be used for that first. And then we take all of the other people who are not employed but want a job and buy them up. That is the idea of the federal job guarantee. And I completely agree with your reservations about the government. Certainly that they are not perfect, as humans are not perfect. And I as a socialist do not necessarily agree that the government needs to run everything for there to be equality.
Yep.
So yeah.
That's where we find a lot of commonalities. Like, we don't want a big government. We really don't. We want more of people and society controlling it. So same as your views, Jonathan, you don't want a big federal government.
Right, exactly. I'm very interested in the idea of employee share buybacks. I mean, I think the only way that we will eventually be able to take down Amazon without completely eradicating the company in general is for the employees to take it over from Jeff Bezos. And I think
there are companies that have, where their employees are shareholders, and it works fantastically in every scenario.
Yeah.
I think Costco is one of them, if I'm not mistaken. And there's
a lot of companies in Europe have board
there's a grocery
members
store that starts with
like
a
that.
W. I cannot remember what it's called.
Are you thinking of Aldi?
No, that's a good one too. But it's another one that's similar to Aldi.
Walmart.
No.
Oh.
No. Are you kidding me?
I don't believe Costco is one of those. Just because I had a couple of friends who worked for Costco and they didn't receive the benefit.
I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, all of their employees get stocks per pay period. So you have a vested interest in how good the business does at that point, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a vested interest, and it's not just a vested interest, you technically have part ownership of the business when you own stock.
More democratic.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You have ownership of the company, then you have a say in how the company is run. And that's the general idea. And I'm very interested in exploring those ideas. And I think there are a lot of companies that we don't know about, 3M being one of them, the company that makes Scotch tape. They have a very interesting structure. That
I know 3M very well. They made our hearing protection while we were in Iraq. You saw how well that went, right? There was that huge like $9 billion lawsuit or something like that against them.
Organizational structure. Because that's the thing, right? Equality does not imply nonviolence. Equality for some does not imply equality for all, right? Like we're sort of seeing that in practice right now because rich people have essentially Medicare for all. Rich people have, everything. They have the equality because they have the money to fund whatever their needs are, right? Socialism for the rich. Whereas the rest of us are paying for that, for them to be able to do that. So, I think that, when we're talking about these broad concepts, there's no, and I would never do this to a cat, but there's no one way to skin a cat, right? There are many ways. And yeah.
So is there a current, I know you mentioned on the panel there was going to be was it a Senate candidate or
Yes.
a Congress candidate?
A congressional candidate. I'm not sure if it's the House or the Senate.
Are you guys at all in touch with anybody that's currently a current elected representative that currently supports this bill? Or sorry, it's not a bill really. The federal jobs guarantee.
The federal job guarantee.
Yeah.
As Diana Presley has a resolution out that is essentially what we would like to see in a job guarantee. We do not personally have any contact with her. If you're asking, are we like the leaders of a movement behind this? No, we're not. Would we like to see that? Absolutely. Would we be willing to start one? Sure. Are there other efforts out there that are already doing this though? Perhaps. And I would like to see more effort on that.
Yeah,
on that
and I think that's the goal of the United Left, start finding those groups, bringing them together and collaborate with the efforts. Bess, it was a pleasure having you here.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to the panel. We'll have a couple of questions that we'll submit there too. And
yeah, please.
We'll share the link everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys have a great show. I'm so happy to be on.